open up Stanford Wikipedia. It's like,
All right, we fixed my audio. Let's
and just
go.
like get an article and I present it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very, very familiar with the trenches.
Okay.
But GK's Chesterton, he basically describes this scenario where he says that, two people are walking in the woods and they come across this stone wall. And the first one says, wow, this stone wall in the middle of the woods has no purpose. It's just, hanging out. There's moss growing on it. We got to tear down this wall.
So many cues. It's so fucked.
Another, his partner is walking with him. He says, hey, we found this stone wall. We don't know exactly where it leads to, but maybe it has a purpose. And
how broken is Soraka Jinx?
The intention with this analogy is to sort of point out the mentality of progressive.
Oh my god, you're so fucked, dude. Just give her the plate. Just give her the plate.
These are the stone walls.
It's okay, guys. Destiny can debate while gaming. It's fine.
And the argument he's making is that progressives are very quick to want to tear down the walls.
Oh, he's not playing Doku.
Okay.
He's solo here.
Have you? Okay, I'm not. I don't mean to say like I've thought of every original thing, but have you heard me talk about this before?
No.
Okay, gotcha.
But you have heard of this like Stonewall thing?
I haven't, but I've independently stumbled upon this. So something that I'll bring up a lot when I'm sure a lot of people have. I'm not trying to sound like a philosophy master, but I notice sometimes
Stonewall trigger
in a lot of like analysis or informally we'll say deconstruction of topics, right? I don't think that's actually what deconstruction is, but like I'll like think of like, okay, well, like why does this institution exist? Why do we have gender? Why do we have sex? Why do we have marriage? And then do we need this? And then can we, reformat this in a way that is more inclusive to other people, right? So for instance, when we think of the
and also in
gender,
a way that provides more utility.
Genitalia with it. Do we need to do that? Is that necessary? Maybe not, And if it's not, then there's like additional groups of people that can be brought in under that umbrella in a beneficial way. So I think that's
in a beneficial way.
However, one thing that I noticed, especially over the past year or two, is people are so quick to see something as a social norm or be socially constructed, but when they hear socially constructed, they think totally arbitrary, irrelevant, and has no value whatsoever. And I noticed that a lot of people on the left on the internet are running really far with that, where they'll be like, women don't need to be enslaved in marriages. We don't need traditional gender roles at all. It's like, okay, that might be true, but there's probably a reason why they existed like this for so long. And I think it's really important to understand that reason, rather than to just say we can get rid of everything and rebuild from scratch,
Based.
Yeah.
Okay,
that
yeah.
was put really well. I'm just gonna add you 1 second. It seems like you have a pretty nuanced view of this, so I'm impressed already.
Yeah. No shit. Destiny's the best trans debater on Twitch.
Okay. Yeah. So your inclination, your impulse to sort of reform and question these ideas, I think is the key here, right? That reform. Because we can recognize that there are elements of gender that are legitimately really toxic, right? So like when a man is told over and over not to express his feelings, not to, outwardly discuss things, that's something that can manifest in negative ways.
For sure.
Or when a man is told, when a woman is told that her place is like only in the home, she can only be raising children. But I think that, it can be easy to like look at that and just take an inch into a mile. And so we know that like gender as a societal construct,
This is everything Destiny said. Just move on.
Have like really useful impacts. So like an example of this is that like we know that children who grow up with a father figure in the home have miles better outcomes, right? And it's not only that there's two parents in the household, but it's actually like we have some understanding that there are parenting styles, and that some of the parenting styles that men are encouraged to.
So she's going with like an intersectional approach, because she's explaining how not only these problems are dealt with in a trans way, but also the social construct of race.
The style that we've sort of prescribed to women is to be really matronly, really caring, like, oh, what's wrong, and that's good. That teaches the
How is Destiny so good at this game?
And the fatherly style is to, assure them that they're going to be all right. Be like, all right, you're good. Get up. You can keep playing.
He flashed for it.
And so,
fuck. He really is bored.
That across civilizations, and across human history, we see overwhelmingly there are certain patterns that are cropping up as like cultural technologies, specifically in regards to gender relations.
Yeah, and this is again, it all plays into this idea where it's like, okay, maybe we can change this a little bit, but if it's shown up relentlessly so many times, there's probably some like very valuable underlying function that it's serving. So if we are going to replace it with something, we have to ensure that that primary function is still being satisfied. Otherwise, we might be getting rid of something that did have some level of great value.
What Destiny's talking about is kind of like at the core of like kind of the ContraPoints argument of like why the trans community hates, or not hates ContraPoints, but disagrees with her messaging, in the fact that kind of the point displayed by ContraPoints that's like kind of misinterpreted in many ways, in my not in my opinion, but you know, is interpreted in many ways, is the difference between you know, for 98% of people in the entire world, you know, an identity of identifying within a binary between a man and a woman, right? It has like infinite utility to them, to the point where, you know, to abolish that completely doesn't make any sense. Even if there is this, there are like critiques and different hardships that the system in this binary like causes, which causes people to have a very, you know, not to overload with buzzwords, but very valid existence outside of this binary. You know, you could also like kind of extend this conversation to the xeno pronouns and stuff like that. But either way, like this is kind of at the heart of the discussion.
The closest concept that I tie this into, I'm very much an atheist. But as I've gotten older, I see that there is a fuck ton of value.
Right now you can do this crazy on hit build where you go shield bow into Wit's End on Tristana and you're fucking unkillable. Although that's not going to do so good into Jace. Oh my god, they're all AD. Never mind, the Wit's End build is horrible. Sorry.
Also got rid of all of like the rituals and all of the.
I'm gonna back up a little bit. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Building aspect that I didn't really understand as much growing up, just being kind of a militant atheist, and somebody that didn't care about community. But I noticed that like in the strive for secularity, we tossed out all of the theology, which was cool, but we also got rid of all of like the rituals and all of the community aspects of religion, which isn't cool. That was probably like really valuable, because it seems like religions and all that have been around for all of human history, and we can see like a function of it. They sort of was important.
Yeah. Really.
The sense of community and the influence on art is like two undeniable qualities of Christianity that you can't like say is bad. Like for someone to be like hardcore atheist and say that all of Christianity is bad, and like, you know, if God really does exist, why does he give children bone cancer? It's like, all right, dude, like we get what your kind of point is, but there's like other places you can be this conversation other than having like this entirely negative response to Christianity.
Religion's a great example of this. Just hitting on this topic, you know, for a second more, and then I'll continue with the religion, because I think it's great that you brought that up. Either there's something that is really effective about like gender relationships and sort of gender roles as a cultural force that keeps people, you know, in good health or keeps civilization well, or there's something like biologically ingrained. You know, those seem to be like the two conclusions that I would draw.
Oh my god, he's smurfing.
Almost every successful civilization has had, you know, some form of gender roles.
I'm really proud he didn't jump over.
That seems to be the two cases. So we need to be really careful when we're like deconstructing this wall to not be destroying useful things.
For sure.
But in regards to the religion aspect, I think it's more than that too. When I was like 13, I was like big into the atheist sphere on YouTube. I watched like The Amazing Atheist and, you know, all
Thunderfoot and maybe even Sargon.
And Sargon of Akkad, all of these people. And and I think also like Christopher Hitchens. But there was this like argument that would get brought up from theists, and they would say things like, without a god, like how do you have morality? And when I was a 13-year-old atheist, this was the kind of question that I would respond with like, that's ridiculous. Like, of course I have morality, because morality is like a human thing, and it's very natural to have morality. And like, just because I don't have your belief system doesn't mean I'm going to be some amoral monster.
Yeah.
But I think that once we start entering into these like more materialist, grounded ideologies, especially ones that put out on the horizon some conception of utopia, some future society that is, you know, gleaming and perfect, I think we can really quickly run into scenarios where we're justifying horrible acts in the moment on the basis of achieving these like material successes. And so there's this, you know, this like question in philosophy. It's like, why reason with someone? Why debate them? Why discuss with them on open and level ground and try to understand their belief system if you can just enact through power politics your will?
What was that
or just,
jump,
like,
dude?
club them over the head, you know, and exert your force. And I think it's because fundamentally you have to have some moral conception about, at the very least, rationality being something to be valued, right? And that's a value statement, fundamentally, a value statement about the morality of reasoning that you can't justify. You just have to like a priori accept that reasoning is something worth pursuing.
Gotcha. This is like the basically we're saying like normativity precedes epistemology or whatever, right? Which I think is probably pretty agreeable generally. I don't know where most philosophers stand on that, but it seems necessary that you have to acknowledge the value in something before you can begin to even talk if the truth statement is worthwhile or not, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think fundamentally that's sort of a religious conception, and it needs to.
Also, we're 15 minutes of the game, and Urgot hasn't killed Kale a million times, so
Faith, yeah,
we're going well.
Faith is a good word,
yeah. And it comes before, you know. These
Okay, well, I spoke too soon.
You know, it can be easy to like tear down and try to deconstruct these ideas, but you really have to understand.
Whole squad's dying.
And the purpose of having like faith in sort of universal ideals is they help gird and prevent society from breaking down.
What is this jump, dude?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, yeah.
So in regards to trans stuff, I think that I sort of wonder if you're ever like totally exhausted with these conversations, because they seem to come up so often.
I'm not exhausted with the conversation. The conversations are super interesting. I'm exhausted by how many people want to have them without ever having thought about them for like 2 seconds first. I think that's the more exhausting thing to me. Because I think there's a lot of I don't mean to, it sounds bad because I'm kind of fetishizing the concept, but I mean, as a cisgender person, I mean, I can really only ever intellectually engage with transness, right? Like, it's not like a personal topic for me. But I like, so not to sound disrespectful, I guess, but trans topics, as I mentioned it, but like, I think that trans topics are interesting because they allow you to explore a lot of questions in society and figure out like where certain concepts come from that are taken for granted. So that might be something as strange as like, how do we decide what is a fair body in a sport, right? Well, you know, we have gender, obviously, or sex or whatever we call it, depending on, you know, where you're at. You know, gender or sex, we have men and women that compete against each other. Okay, well, that's obviously, we need to do that for, you know, fairness. Well, we have other things too. What about like weight classes? Or what about like, you know, we have weight classes on other things. We don't have like height classes on a lot of things. This is kind of strange, right? So like that, it opens up a lot of interesting questions. Like, well, what's fair when it comes to competition? It also opens up a lot of interesting questions when it's like, well, what is a man or what is a woman? And I've had really interesting conversations before when you find out that like, we don't really know intellectually what a man or woman is. It's kind of a thing to be into it. And when you start to question it, you run into very quickly like these like weird moral dumbfounded positions. I had an argument with Sargon before. I was like, well, what do you think is a woman? And like he would give answers where it was clear he hadn't thought about it. And he's like, well, the ability to have a child makes you a woman. And it's like, well, really, what about like an infertile woman? Is that still a woman?
I think I watched this
And his
interview.
response, I think, to justify the decision, well, that makes you less of a woman. And it's like, well, really, is that really what the response you want to go with? Does that really make the most sense there?
Hard road to go down.
Yeah. Because then it's like, now, first of all, what does that even mean? Are you subscribing then to an infinite genders thing? Because to be less of a woman or less of a man implies there's more than just man or woman. Because most people view that as binary if you're anti-trans, right? So it's just like, it's a long-winded way of saying there's a lot of interesting material that comes up that you can discuss that's peripheral to trans issues by introducing that as a concept or a talking point. Yeah. But most of the concepts just boil down to, do you hate trans people or not? Because if you don't fully believe me, you're transphobic, and if you do, yeah. So it's really boring really quickly sometimes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, it's cool to hear that. I guess you're not totally bored by the conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and it does
Okay.
seem like
Keeping him
they
at
do
range?
connect. They're sort of at this like flashpoint in the culture
Mhm.
where they connect to a lot of disparate ideas, for sure.
Why are you taking the Kale's wave, dude?
One thing that I do disagree with.
The only way you win this game is if this Kale gets to
is,
16.
do yourself healthcare.
Oh,
Oh, fuck.
so the do-it-yourself healthcare for trans stuff to me is actually the exact same conversation as vaccine mandates.
That's interesting. Tell me about it.
I think that there are actually a lot of, as much as I am pro-vaccine and even maybe would be pro-vaccine mandate, there are a lot of good arguments, I think, against mandating vaccinations. I can see those arguments. I don't agree with them, but I think they're strong arguments and I can respect those arguments. But the problem is that 99% of vaccine mandate arguments are built on horseshit anti-vax information. So chances are, if you tell me that you're against vaccine mandates, you're about to say some real stupid shit. When it comes to like the do-it-yourself hormone stuff, my understanding is depending on the country you're in, I think in the UK was last time I saw it, it can be like 2 years to wait for some types of hormone therapy. Okay, and if you're prepubescent or going through puberty, to be frank, you're fucked, right? That's a really, really rough prescription. If you know you're trans and you're 14 and you're being told that like, well, come back when you're done with puberty and we'll see what we can do for you. It's like, okay, well, fuck my life, right? Fuck me, I guess,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I can
Can't
see,
relate, hon.
I
Can't
can
relate.
see the value there in the like,
The fuck.
if you're really committed to this and there's no other way to get these types of drugs, here's the do-it-yourself hormone route. Like we're going to provide a level. It's basically mutual aid for trans people in a way. The problem that I have though is, oh my god, the communities that exist.
Yeah, it's never
around this shit
never
are
just
so
that.
Fucking weird to me, at least in the Twitter space. It makes me really uncomfortable with it. When you get like people that are like bragging about like, I talked to 7 minors last month and I got all of them this sick HRT shit. And it's like, that sounds really fucking creepy. It sounds really weird the way that some people engage with it. And that ends up being my problem with it more than the concept of like do-it-yourself hormones, I guess. That was a long-winded story.
Okay, so I've also seen like people will post like the iridescent like anime girl like estrogen bottles, and they're like, it's very like marketed as a product, rather than like a healthcare solution. I do wonder if part of that and the difficulty there is with the sort of demedicalization of transness.
You lose this 1v1.
Sort of insistence that it's just a gender identity thing. And
You're gonna jump onto Mirror Man at Jace, dude? Are you kidding me?
Any underlying biological like drive or need to do something. Once you
I mean, they killed everyone, so that's what it's like playing AD carry.
Yes.
But.
So like we don't have to get into this if you don't want to, but a huge problem that I have with a lot of the current talk about trans stuff in the very far left spaces online, which is every space on fucking Twitch, is that in my opinion, it turns transness into just like a clothing or another way to express yourself. So when people start talking about like autism, gender, and all of this stuff, and like gender and sex, they don't really mean anything, and it's all kind of whatever. It makes me wonder, like, okay, well, why the fuck do trans people kill themselves then over this shit? Like, why would you do something so stupid? If gender and sex are all arbitrary, irrelevant things, why would you ever commit suicide because you're the wrong gender or sex? It's so dumb, right? And I feel like those conversations start to miss this rejection that there is a fact of the matter about your sex or gender, which I believe there is, and I think it's the source of trans issues, is that there is an underlying fact of the matter in your brain about what you feel your gender is. That's something that really bothers me, and a lot of these discussions end up revolving around that.
Not only do they revolve around it, but especially the xenogender arguments, it's like completely ignoring that weight. It's like a suspension of disbelief thing for me. At least like anytime I try to listen to any of these arguments, it's just like an insane like secondhand cringe fest. Like I just can't engage with it on Twitch.
I had a discussion with Bastiat a while back, like years back, and it was about trans stuff. And I took a position that is sometimes called transmedicalist. I don't know if you've heard of this.
That in order to be trans, you are required to have gender dysphoria?
Yeah, that was, so I had like the weakest.
Oh shit, you're like the ultimate transphobe online then. So you're the
Well,
person that they
the
hate the
weakest one.
most.
I think someone in the chat said like, okay, you're the only medicalist that I can respect.
Okay.
Basically, my position was that like you have to have some amount of dysphoria to consider yourself trans. And I was like, that can be like whatever, but you're absolutely right. And maybe we'll talk about like how insane the dialogue has gotten, where like that's the ultimate transphobe position. But my fundamental argument was that like
That's like rhetorically ineffective, though. I get what she means, but Jesus Christ.
And is spending like every week or so, they're like breaking down about their body, and they're struggling, and it's a constant source of shame and disgust and difficulty in their life that they have to do this, and it prevents them from pursuing jobs or careers or whatever. And you take that kind of person and you compare them to someone who is transitioning.
You're so inting, dude.
Really need to, they're not going to break down if they don't. I would say that like there's a disservice in language if we're describing two fundamentally different groups of people with the same word. And I think it creates problems, like especially in like.
But it's the difference between gender dysphoria and gender euphoria, right? If you prefer one thing much more otherwise, but it's not attainable in any sense because you've already gone through puberty before realizing this was even a possibility for you. What the fuck? What is this distinction? It's so fucking dumb.
Where we're talking about where do.
But maybe I'm taking it personally.
And well, if trans is just someone that like anyone can be or not be and doesn't necessarily correlate with dysphoria, well then why can't trans prisoners just be transitioned? I mean, ultimately, it's not something that is baked into their brain, so they should be able to just like take it off like a shirt.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a really dangerous philosophical position to get into, where you're sort of boiling it down to just identity. But also, the culture has changed, and like I don't think that the transmedicalist definition of transgender is one that the culture is going with. So like I don't use it. I've like given up on this battle, even though I think it's like philosophically incomprehensible to describe both these groups with the same label. That's just where we are as a culture.
Sometimes and this is a frustrating thing, I don't mean to ascribe bad faith in it. Sometimes it feels like what people want to do is they should really use a different label for something, but they want to be able to call in all of the semantic
Destiny was about to go top and steal kills wave again before she hit 16.
Power and severity of one term and use it to describe something kind of different. So like an example of this, I'm trying not to branch off into a topic where we're gonna fight over because I don't want to like sidestep too much, but like I would say like rape or sexual assault sometimes can feel like it gets there to where like you might have a boyfriend or girlfriend who they're tired and the significant other really wants to have sex and they're like, I don't want, whatever, okay, fine, and then they're like, yeah, please, can we do it? And then you go along with it, and then people are like, that was rape, and it's like, yeah, okay, like was it shitty? Yeah, kind of, maybe. Like, was it rape? And they're like, well, there are a whole bunch of different types of rape. And my response is, and it always triggers people, okay? My response is, okay, sure. Maybe there are a whole bunch of different types of rape and sexual assault, but that means that when you tell me in the future somebody got raped or assaulted, I'm not gonna think it's a really bad thing. I'm gonna need more information there to have a feeling about it, because apparently not all like rape or sexual assault is that big of a deal. Sometimes it just sounds like somebody was just being like a little shitty, because yeah, it feels like people wanna draw in like all of the power of a certain word, but then they wanna dramatically change like what it could stand for, which irritates me sometimes. Because then it can take away theoretically from some of the people that are dealing with those issues. So for instance, when you get a whole bunch of people that are super happy and healthy and they're cool and they're like, yeah, I'm trans, but like, my gender identity is female, but my gender expression is male 100%. I have no dysphoria whatsoever. Never gonna take HRT, never gonna do SRS. Yeah, I just don't really care that much, but yeah, I'm trans. It's like, well, fuck, like you might be, but your experience is
so radically different. Yeah.
Encompass a certain experience, and when it gets broadened so much, it kind of means nothing. And in some cases, like liberals or progressives understand this. We'd be like, well, why call it Black Lives Matter? Why not All Lives Matter? Well, because if you call it All Lives Matter, now we're not focused on the important issues, on Black Lives Matter. Okay, why do you call it feminism? Why not egalitarianism? Well, if you're going to call it, egalitarianism, well, we're talking about like women's issues. It's important. It's like, okay, well.
Okay, I mean, Dusty's kind of spitting here, but like, I don't agree. He has a point, but I don't agree.
Yeah,
Bad take.
no, I mean, it's something that like I struggle with. Because when I tell people I'm
Also, shout out Fate Falls. Fate Falls on Twitch. Follow Fate Falls. My homie. Boom. Fate Falls
like,
in game.
I had to like fight for people like my family to like take me seriously as like this is something that's like I need to do and engage with. Because it's like, it's not gonna go away from me. I had to like fight to prove that.
But does taking hormones automatically make that fight more valid?
Talk about being trans online. It like hurts me
Fuck,
a little
dude.
bit because I think think it erodes some of that fight that we've had to go through of like proving how important this is. And I think that's a really sad fact, but it just speaks to like the ever increasing desire to like weaponize these terms for sort of political arguments. This is going to be like a sort of spicy take, but I think the same thing has happened with racism. I read Ibram X. Kendi's book recently, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and in it there's this.
I'm gonna attempt to pre-watch this, but the difference between in the focus of intersectionality, it's much more less focused on these one-to-one individual experiences where you're like called a slur or something, and much more much more interested with how like systems affect you and disenfranchise you within either the economy in terms of like working and getting a job with labor, or having enough money to pay for that, both ends of that. So it's like that difference where who's the fucking bitch? Who's boom? All right. White fragility. Robin DiAngelo. All right. So Robin DiAngelo, the entire book is like focused and like obsessed with like how we can be better to our like black coworkers. When like the entire problem is whether or not that your black coworker is hired in the first place. And I'm not too familiar with Ibram X. Kendi's work, but it's kind of in the same school. It's like the 1619 Project. If you say that slavery started at 1619, it's, you can point out how it's changed, it evolves over time. But if you say that slavery, as we know it as Americans, started in 1619, when the ending of imports of slaves after America was settled created a protected market for slaves and drove the value of them up, which caused freed slaves to be bought or kidnapped back into slavery, which is the entire plot of 12 Years a Slave. It ignores like that fact. It ignores this like studies of like phrenology and like scientific racism, like so many different ways in which American slavery is so uniquely cruel, to the point where it's like, oh yeah, these slaves that were treated as like, absolute luxuries, because at the time in 1619 indentured servitude was, the hot commodity of the day, in terms of labor. But slaves were a absolute like the slavery in America at 1619 is such a disservice to how horrible slavery became before emancipation. But then they entered sharecropping. There's the GI Bill. Like, God damn it.
Chapter where he talks about microaggressions, and the example of a racist action was, a black girl not being called on in class, and maybe that is like a legitimate, example of like a serious racist thing. But the way that it's presented in the book, there's like no context to like really understand that it is racist. Like, we don't get a sense of the reason why she might have called on like another kid instead, whether the other kid was like typically very quiet. We just don't know. But the thing that he says is that like it's not enough. We can't just call it a microaggression. We have to call it what it is, and that's a racist, aggression on something.
Yeah.
And I think this is like an absolute disaster for like actually calling out racism, because like racism is horrible. It's like one of these like unique evils in life that most people can recognize as something that just feels so deeply unfair. And yet we're calling things racist that like I think it just like waters down the idea.
Yeah, and my understanding, I treat everything in life like a medical prescription, right? The reason why we categorize things in any way, whether it's language or literally categorizing things in our brains or whatever, is because there's some utility to it. There's a reason,
pre-watch.
We get some sort of function out of doing this. And when things get broadened so much, the utility is either diminished or it sometimes becomes like the antithesis of what the word was supposed to mean. So like if I call somebody racist, well, traditionally, if I think that there's somebody that's a racist, like, okay, I know this person thinks about people a certain way, and
He's gonna say Blue Lives Matter, equating it to Nazis, and he's gonna bring it to Rittenhouse.
So let's say there's somebody that thinks that black people are genetically inferior to white people, and they truly believe that they have like a warrior animal gene, and like this is a fundamentally different, right? My conversation with that person is gonna be way
Let's
different than like
go.
a racist woman. That
My
thinks that
man.
curly hair is like
Pepe in the chat. Based.
Right? Now, is the woman that thinks that like all natural black hair looks ugly, is that bad? Of course. Could it be considered a microaggression? Absolutely, in certain circumstances.
Absolutely.
Could it make black people feel really shitty, especially black women? Absolutely, 100%. All of that is true, but it is a fundamentally different type of thought than a person that genuinely like hates or views black people as inferior or fundamentally different than white people. And when it's all called racism, it's like, okay, well, fuck, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to say. And I said this, what I just said before about rape and sexual assault, I said it with everything now. Whenever somebody tells me, like, oh, that person's racist. Okay, and I don't know what that means. You have to give me more information. Like, oh, that person's white supremacist. I don't know what that means. Are you telling me that they, like, called the cops one time and they're white supremacists? Or, like, oh, that person's a
fascist.
Yeah, fascist. Like, what do you mean? Like, they voted for a Republican in their local election? I don't know what the fuck. Like, all of these words mean nothing anymore. And they're all used all the time for everything. But the problem is what I said earlier is even though the words get diluted, the severity of the word is still there. So if you act racist, meaning you make a dumb joke or you say something dumb about somebody's hair, it is just as bad as like the explicit approval of lynching somebody.
Yeah, it's like calling the Rittenhouse judge fascist.
Let's say you do
Bruh.
a dumb joke.
He's a fucking weirdo, dude,
rap
but
song, something stupid. You shouldn't do it or whatever. But let's say you do it. People will treat you the same as though you're Richard Spencer or Nick Fuentes. And I was like, holy fuck, like chill. Like it's not fair to smuggle in all the severity of what these words meant, but then broaden it to include, you know, like 50% of human activity. I think that's insane.
I was on Kiwi Farms or watching like a VOD from Kiwi Farms, and the dude like Noel, he was like making fun of Fuentes for saying that some American-born Muslims were good people, and I thought it was really funny. Yeah, the entire chat was going crazy, and then everyone like some people chanted Booger Nick, some people, a lot of people just like called them Mexican slurs, but you know. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you put it well. And I think it speaks to also like
I think you put it well.
just the way the society has moved, you know, probably for the last 600 years.
Society.
Certainly since, you know, American history. We've just gotten further and further left, right? So like the right used to be defending, you know, aristocracy and the monarchy and the Catholic Church.
Hell yeah. I would always support aristocracy. Follow her on Twitch. Follow her on Twitter. She's absolutely based.
You know, slavery. And then it was on the other side of the civil rights movement. And then of gay rights. And so on. And conservatives today are, you know, much less
Yeah,
of
chat.
conservatives of the past. You know, we have like Caitlyn Jenner running on the Republican ticket in California. And in
I'm sorry for making fun of her. I'm being rude.
their conservative party is like pro-abortion. And so, you know, the culture has just moved progressively left. And I think that what happens is either, you know, if your beliefs are truly based in like principle, and
Truly
derived
based.
not from your external culture, they're going to be sort of set, right? And they might change a little bit as you get new information. Hopefully they do, but they're not going to move with the culture. And so eventually you're going to become a conservative or eventually a reactionary. And
Reactionary.
what the left have done is they've sort of implicitly
Fuck.
recognized this, and they've tried to stake out positions ahead of the progression, right? So like someone like Foch, who's like very progressive now, is probably going to look good in like 5-10 years.
Foch bad.
As we move further left.
Unless he doesn't get it
It's created
banned.
An interesting dynamic where either you move with the culture and you continue to be a liberal, you move faster than the culture and you're a progressive or a leftist, or you move slower than the culture, or you move backwards even, or just, you know, you stay still and you eventually become a conservative or a reactionary.
There's no neutral on a moving train.
Where 5 years ago, I was like the farthest left cocksoy boy ever. Conservatives fucking hated me. Centrists, like anti-SJW gamer bros, hated me. And even a lot of left-leaning people saw me as being like pretty far left. And my positions have moved a
That'll
little
be
bit over time, some to the right, some
shit.
to the left. But for the most part, I'm either where I was like 4 or 5 years ago, or I'm a little bit left.
Definitely the Keemstar and interaction on Scuff podcast is like a really good note of that.
More or less. But now, as the years have gone, so about 2 years ago, leftists started to fucking hate me. They found out that like, oh wait, Destiny's not a communist, we hate him. So everybody on the left called me a conservative and a Nazi, and everybody on the right called me still kind of like a soy boy or whatever. And then I had like the centrist audience. I was like, oh, he's a centrist, I like it, whatever the fuck that means. And now today, it seems like the conservatives of the internet are like, oh, Destiny's like a really reasonable person. Like, I like how he has these conversations. People on the far left, I'm basically Hitler reincarnate to them. And then some center-leaning people are like, Destiny's okay, but he's kind of a jerk or whatever. And yeah, and it feels weird. I'm like sitting here like watching everything move so far off. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like, it's like I can have conversations with conservatives on the internet who will be like, yeah, you know, I just don't want trans people playing sports, but otherwise I'm okay with it, right? That was in the 90s, that was impossible, okay? The 2000s, unfathomable. 2015, maybe. Like, no, it's like,
Maybe.
but there's, to borrow words from my hated daddy, Jordy Peterson, I disagree with a lot of what he says, but he talks sometimes about this concept of there being a tension. And I think that tension is very important. You have one side advocating something, you have another.
He talked about this in the Rittenhouse debate and his Rittenhouse coverage, and that two forces working against each other, like the defense and prosecution, can result in good fashions, such as the Rittenhouse verdict, which was very truthful. Oh my God, hello. The Ahmaud Arbery case, complete justice for an actual lynching in America today. You have the Maxine Ghislaine trial. There's that one dude from Cuba, the fucking truck driver, that was sentenced to like 110 years, and now he's only doing 10 years. And I mean, maybe 10 years is too much, but it's a little bit better than life in prison. So having these forces comes to good illustrations, at least in a legal sense. Maybe he'll take it there. We'll see.
And that pole is always going to keep, even if you agree more with one side, it'll keep it grounded. And it feels like that string got cut because everybody's in their own like echo chambers more and more these days. There's less crossover in communities, and now you get these people that are running so far off into one direction. Like if you want to put a number, a quantifiable number for it, right? 5 years ago, 15 an hour, 15 an hour, 15 an hour. That's what we talked about. And then once you had this decoupling of all the media online, where you're like, okay, 15 an hour, you literally had people saying like 15 an hour. That's the base. That's the loser's start. 20 an hour, 25 an hour. You see people saying like 25 an hour is the negotiated position. Like, what the fuck world are you in? Some states I'm thinking are still like.
I think Sam Cedar has some point on 30 an hour. I think.
Yeah,
I think that might have happened.
Do you think this is a recent phenomenon?
I do love Daddy Cedar though. Absolutely based.
I think that it is recent, and every single generation feels that way. Everybody always says this is the worst generation for polarization and everything. The reason why I think it's recent is because I think we're at a unique point in human history where we have very, very, very powerful technologies that are financially incentivized into separating us into groups and shoving ads down our throats. And I think that incentive has made for a very unique environment. The internet is unique in that you no longer have to confront opposition in real life. If you believe that the moon landings were fake, 20 years ago, your friends are going to make fun of you for it. You're going to have to talk to around you. Now you can find any group online you want to reinforce whatever belief you want. And there are companies that are incentivized into keeping you in those groups because they want to keep you watching content for as long as possible.
Transphobia is actually just alienating a whole bunch of people that would actually be.
Do you think that perhaps the tendency of social media platforms to
Cringe donut.
highly regulate and like ban people off is going to contribute to this effect? Allowing spaces to become more and more polarized? Or do you think that moderation is probably a good thing?
It's a really hard, it depends on what, like, it's hard.
Okay.
Yeah. Moderation is a good thing, but we're going to disagree on like, or maybe we won't disagree, but like, I would disagree on the type of, like, moderation is a good thing. You probably shouldn't be allowed to post child porn on Twitter. I think we can all agree with that. That's a good thing, right? But like, should you ban somebody because they
Mr. Girl might have some disagreement.
I'm not too sure about that. Like, that's weird. But yeah, go ahead.
There was, I wish I could say his name. There was this organizer for a Middle Eastern terrorist group. He got very popular on the internet a while back, became very radicalized. I believe he moved to Morocco, and he got radicalized initially through like Malcolm X and being brought into the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay.
And basically, after he's left, terrorism, after he's left organizing for terrorist organizations, he's talked about how he's done a lot of research on how people are radicalized on the internet. And some of the information or the research indicates that just like banning people off these platforms creates this effect where you just move them to like another private platform. So what they do is they create their own website and they create their own chat rooms, and they're no longer being challenged. And so the problem either worsens or stays about the same.
You see with Gavin McInnes, even Stephen Crowder.
It's a unique situation to the
The
terrorist
Mug Club,
organization.
like
But
exclusive
it does
shit.
worry me a little bit, like when we see
And
like, videos
I think it's
outlets like
Free
Open
Speech
Shit
TV. I'm
or
pretty sure it's got
some of
Megadeth and
these
stuff.
um, these private social media platforms that have enormous influence in our day-to-day life, and maybe for the most part they're pretty even-handed with how they moderate. I think they're pretty even-handed right now, but when it comes down to it, I think that if there's going to be like some way that they swing, Twitter is not going to swing in favor of the right wing. I think they're going to swing in favor of the progressives.
Probably.
And that's an enormous amount of cultural force to be putting, I think, in the hands of one party. It's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you'll see that, like, even across Reddit, like, certain subreddits are basically every subreddit is political. If you're on, like,
Have you seen the Herman Cain Awards subreddit?
I have seen it, yes.
That is mass psychopathy. Holy shit, dude.
Sure, it gets a little bit crazy for sure. It reminds me a little bit of, like, have you heard of, like, child
I'll have to
free
check it out.
or- Oh yeah, that gets crazy. Even if you don't like children, they fucking hate children. Oh my god.
Holy shit.
But yeah, but you'll get all these subreddits that are like left leaning, and then every now and then you'll stumble across one like the political compass memes. I don't know why, but that's like a subreddit basically for far right people. It's like really weird. I didn't know that until I stumbled into a few threads. Like holy shit. But yeah, that lack of engagement. I don't know who I want to. A lot of the times I'm blaming the left, but it might be what I really mean to say, or I try to make people aware of this. I'm blaming the left now, but it probably has to do more like when you're the dominant political faction. This is just how you tend to exercise your power. Because they talk about the left likes to deplatform people today and everything. But like when I was growing up, okay, conservatives were mad as fuck about putting happy holidays on Starbucks cups, or they wanted to ban all gay people from like any
Dixie Chicks 9/11.
The right has definitely done this as well in the past. But I noticed this trend online where, and I don't know how many Discord communities you're involved in, I identify this. If you have left-leaning people and right-leaning people in a server, there's two ways that this goes. Eventually, the left-leaning people start to escalate, like, we want to ban this type, but you can't say these jokes, you can't make these things. And the demands will grow until either they're basically saying, you need to either curb or ban all of the conservative talk on this Discord, or we're going to go and leave and make our own. So every Discord becomes either this far-right Nazi radicalized space, or it becomes like a far-left tanky Mao worship zone, and there's nothing in between. Anytime you'll get these servers online that have conservatives and liberals or leftists or whatever on them, like other leftists will try to get these servers shut the fuck down. Like there's Nazis on the server, there's conservatives, they're transphobic, they're racist, and they'll try to find anything and get them all banned. And it's like, okay, fuck. That deletion of any common area, like where we're all segregated into our own political houses, I think is so negative. And I think it is relatively unique to this time period now.
Yeah, because the technology access is just so completely different. But, I mean, one thing you said was that this seems to be a consequence of, like, the dominant cultural political platform, right? And, like, in the past, you would expect it to be the opposite way, right?
That conservatives would be exercising this because they were the domineering political...
Sure. And maybe you see that with, like, McCarthyism, right? But it also seems to me that, like, McCarthyism is very much the historical anomaly, whereas, again, for the past 600 years, perhaps longer, perhaps a little bit less long. But we've just seen like a progressive shift leftward on things. And so it seems to me that as far as cultural force, the left has always had a really strong...
I really like her anecdotes based in history. I think that's like pretty much the only form of anecdotal evidence that you can really support an argument. And she does it very, very well.
But the media system was still like overwhelmingly liberal and arrayed against him, and the intellectual systems of like Harvard, Stanford, as well as just general colleges were still arrayed against him. Professors were still, arrayed against him. And so that's what I mean when I say like the left has continued to have this dominant the White House in 2016. He took a progressive shift leftward on things. And so it seems to me that as far as cultural force, the left has always had a really strong control of cultural force, even if it didn't have the political institutions. And what I mean by that is like, when Trump took the White House in 2016, he took executive power, but the media system was still like overwhelmingly liberal and arrayed against him. And the intellectual systems of like Harvard, Stanford, as well as just general colleges were still arrayed against him. Professors were still, arrayed against him. And so that's what I mean when I say like the left has continued to have this dominant cultural force, even when it doesn't have political control. And that stretches back like much further. If you're looking to like really, I think
that's actually really cool.
Left-wing narratives, or to just interject some nuance into discussions, what you really need is a right-wing intellectual movement. You don't need the right wing to gain political power. You need them to like, have a voice.
Destiny laughs at the thought of a right-wing intellectual movement.
In media or in the academy, directly to talk about or or just question ideas. And
Yeah.
really, I think the right wing is in this position where a lot of right wing positions are, they're kind of fucking insane. So
Yeah.
like the QAnon
Yeah,
shit is
they're just
fucking insane.
untenable.
Anti-vax shit is fucking insane, and it's because like these people aren't like seriously having to challenge each other. I don't think.
Yeah, I agree 1,000,000%. I used to say that if like I think when I was like a libertarianish person like 5 or 6 years ago, I used to like, not fully bought into the left stuff because I was way more conservative when I was younger. And I'd always say like it sucks that there's not like a conservative or Republican Party for people that aren't like fucking lunatics. Like I really like guns, but I fucking hate the NRA. I like the idea of businesses being able to operate as they please in some ways, but you have to acknowledge that climate change is real. Like you can't be delusional about this. Or I like personal responsibility and all that. But, like how the fuck are you gonna ban abortion? Like there is no sane conservative or Republican Party right now in the United States for I'm conservative or I want to be a conservative, but like goddamn those motherfuckers over there are crazy. But I feel like the issue is that the left is increasingly kind of like flying off into the side as well. So we kind of started under Biden. Maybe there's going to be kind of like this reorganization of both parties, catering more towards like the moderate centers of the party. Maybe I don't know, but it's hard to say because who the fuck knows what's
Biden's
going
very
to happen.
progressive. Like
Biden is progressive, but
himself as moderate. But if you look at his policies, he's very progressive.
sure, but compared to where like the internet culture is or the left wing of the party,
Yeah, like, but saying he's the most progressive candidate since Reagan is like saying you're the smartest football player on the team. To borrow a quote from Heather's. The smartest player on the football team. Like sure, it doesn't mean anything. Like Biden going for antitrust legislation and like holding looking at right to repair and stuff like that. Sure, it's like a step in the right direction, but if it's like the same force behind like force the vote, right? If you're too progressive, it's gonna fail. So you need to like kind of toe the line. But I feel as though he's gonna like try and then just like fail and then quit. So sure, he's the most progressive candidate with like antitrust policy and a lot of plans, but that's not really saying much.
still like fucking Hitler, right? Like a lot of people say, and
Which
a lot of people online will be like,
how insane is
I know people say shit like Bernie Sanders is a moderate, and then also these people have no concept of fucking worldwide politics. It's like, oh, all of American political parties are very, very, very far right on the worldwide spectrum. Like, socialism is super popular all across Europe. It's like, no, it's not. The fuck are you talking about? That's not true anywhere. Why would you even say that? And people just have, both wings of the parties are very crazy right now. But the left wing of the Democratic Party is relatively small. The crazy part, I would say. But the right wing of the Conservative Party is fucking wild, okay? Like, 90% of these people would literally suck Trump's dick if he came out and said, suck me off and I'll help you in your election. Unironically, right? Or like I think it's still half the Republican Party believes the election was actually stolen. Like, illegal votes were cast and shit. So, I don't know. The Republican Party is fucking lost. As much as I complain about the crazy left people online today, there's a lot of problems on the right. Holy shit.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I want to go into like hardcore, like borderline, like schizo posting here, but
Okay.
I mean, like,
Wait, where did schizo posting come from? Where'd you get that?
schizo posting? It's like an internet meme.
Okay, gotcha. Just checking. Go ahead.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
didn't create it, Destiny. You didn't
to
create
go into, like,
schizo
sort of
posting.
Craziness, just a little bit of craziness.
This is the new.
I think we can
It's a new form of like ableist language, so you don't have to say spurging. Like that's all it is. Like you didn't come up with anything new.
sort of question how
I'm in your walls. I'm in your walls. I'm in your walls.
ideas
Under your skin.
each other. I think we both agree that there are certain traits of a belief system that are going to make it more or less likely to spread. So, like, if part of your belief system is that it's necessary to like talk to other people and evangelize so that they can like be with you and maybe enjoy the fruits of heaven, right? If that's part of your belief system, it's going to spread faster than a belief system that part of the belief system is that it needs to be kept, secret and no one can know about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there are certain qualities of like progressivism, and the fact that progressivism tends to take root in like intellectual and mass media institutions that make it like very effective at spreading, versus conservatism, the right wing ideologies tend to be spread more through like church gatherings, smaller communities, or like just having children and spreading it from parent to child. And so it's sort of this evolutionary understanding of how belief systems grow and spread, and the belief systems that are most viral are going to become dominant. They're going to become mimetic across time. And so I think also like humans are a dominant species on Earth. We're incredibly dominant. And so when we look at the species that survive well on Earth, species survive or die based on how they're able to negotiate with the human domination of the Earth, right? So like corn survives.
Q-pop, baby, let's go.
Biomass of corn, it's extremely effective at existing on large scales, and it's extremely effective by having evolved in a way that humans enjoy. So I think sometimes
I'm getting in on that Twitch points, but
there's a political system that is extraordinarily effective and takes political or cultural control of large-scale institutions, then it's also going to become politically effective for another political ideology to sort of play the role of the corn, and that is adopt traits that make it like easy to be predated upon. Are you familiar with the leftward?
Match found, baby.
It's this like lefty meme. Basically, they like propagate the idea that like Republicans move the culture or politics left, and Democrats prevent it from going. Or Republicans move the culture.
See Overton window.
And Democrats prevent it.
Oh,
from moving left.
fuck! There's the worst YouTuber in the history of all of YouTubers. I think Second Thought might have talked about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's crazy because that's the exact opposite of what happens,
Okay, yeah.
right? Like Republicans are notoriously bad at actually like passing anything. To talk shit on Republicans a little bit, they don't really have like a cohesive like guiding ideology. Like we got tax cuts under Trump, and a few like disastrous foreign policy things, but we didn't really there was no like guiding right-wing political ideology behind Trump. And so I think that in some sense, if the right was growing to be like really strong and seriously challenge left-wing progressive thought, it might just get like stamped out. And so it might actually benefit right-wing thought ideologically or evolutionarily to sort of make itself a prey, make itself a target, and to be sort of crazy and out there. I don't know if that's exactly true, but that is like a system.
In some way, Marjorie Taylor Greene is playing up the fact that people have been preyed upon by the committee, the January 6th committee. So I think it's going to get to the point where between critical race theory, brainwashing your children, and COVID, vaccine mandates, I think there's a lot of weight to what she is saying.
Theological explanation for why the right wing can sort of really lack any sort of guiding principles or any real coherency.
Maybe. So there's that. There's probably like a million ways by which you can analyze why any political movement propagates the way that it does, I'm sure. But I think that another way that I would look at it, a lot through the framing that I used earlier, and I kind of looked at everything through one framing, so you get lost that way, of course. But like, I think that the fact that in real life we're segregated really heavily too, similarly to online spaces, to where in real life conservatives tend to live.
No.
You can look at maps all across the world.
Don't say segregated like that. All right. Segregation was a time in American history. Do not strip the historical significance away from the word segregation. That's the shit that Tucker Carlson does when he talks about a segregated, vaccinated, and unvaccinated classes. Avoid it rhetorically.
World. And in almost every country in the world, you have blue cities and red non-cities. It's like just it's almost ubiquitous.
He's right though. Like the point is 100% right.
It's very real and can explain people's values sometimes, and it's something that because people that live in those red areas tend to not have that same representation in other parts of the culture, people aren't always aware of it. When Trump got elected, you mentioned before the idea of like, well, if we just shun people and we shove them off into kind of other spaces, maybe they'll go away or maybe they'll start being radicalized. I'm not speaking just myself. I speak for everybody when I say nobody was expecting Trump to win. That was impossible. There were at least 6 different moments where Trump said something and you're like, oh, it was funny to watch him, but like he's gone. Making him no way, he's done. Grab him by the pussy, no way, he's done. Calling Ted Cruz's dad the fucking Zodiac, he's gone. There's no way he was this like being pro Planned Parenthood as a fucking Republican, impossible, right? Speaking out there's just so many crazy things as you said, and none of it mattered. But I think something that hurt a lot of people was I think a lot of people genuinely did not believe, or at least a lot of people on the left genuinely did not believe that there were that many conservatives on the right that still existed in this country because they've been shunned from mainstream media for so long and they've been shamed and like you're not allowed to think this, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to be this way.
The silent majority.
They're not gone. They're still there, and they're half the American voting population.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's this massive disconnect between the people who are in cities and they're talking with their, city liberal friends about, what is correct and worth thinking and believing in, and what values are good. And it's just, not totally misunderstanding the actual politics of the country. Like people will sometimes shit on Biden for like, not doing like the most progressive thing ever.
Yeah.
And
Why didn't Biden single-handedly like change immigration, give us healthcare, abolish all student loan debt? Like Jesus Christ, yeah.
And ignoring just like the actual political practicalities of these things. The other thing is like it would be deeply unpopular to like bully your way through political systems, like force through very progressive things. Like that would just be a complete disaster for the Democratic Party.
And in some cases even impossible. Like the system wouldn't even allow it.
Right, and oftentimes impossible. So yeah, it definitely seems to me that there's this massive disconnect, and I agree that there's like technological reasons for that. I wonder though, what you think the solution would be to like help address that.
I don't have any solutions for these. Are all like grand problems with society. Something that I say a lot that is really unfortunately when it comes to things like
They're already
sexism
up a
and
kill.
racism is I really truly do feel like we've done a really good job in society at solving like almost all of the easy problems. Like we don't walk around just calling people the N-word or lynching people. We don't tell women you're not allowed to do that. You're a woman, right? All of the ways.
At least when it does happen, we
far more subtle.
properly
So
prosecute them.
Yeah, to even begin to like, I think I can probably explain to my kid why it's wrong to call somebody a racial slur. I don't know. It would be very hard to explain why it's bad to say that like we should accept different types of hair because if we don't, some people that have certain types of hair can feel excluded, and we don't want to make like that's a really hard concept to explain to somebody, you know. Or maybe it's not hard, but they're going to need to like have a base level understanding. They're going to need to want to engage in that topic, and like yeah, it's just something. Yeah, a lot of the easy problems in society have just been kind of solved for, and yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, no, I agree absolutely. I think that also, if you look at like hunger, right, or like general human well-being, or the poverty line, we're in so much better of a place than we used to be, you know, and it doesn't make news headlines when you don't get involved in another war, right, by definition, or, you know, when things just improve slightly year after year. So it seems to me that we simultaneously exist in perhaps the most materially prosperous era in human history, and the safest era in human history, and the fairest, you know, by not having like wide-scale slave societies and stuff. And yet, there are people, lots of people, especially in my generation, who have this perception that the world is like fucked.
The worst time, yeah, because the language got so much like I don't know if I actually don't know. I'd be curious, maybe I lack the perspective.
To be fair, they probably point at wealth inequality, the fact that it's like never been this bad, other than like the Gilded Age, which like there's a lot of different antitrust policies that maybe like worked then could be expanded to work now. But I think that's generally the sentiment they're getting at. But it's also not necessarily like the end of the world, right?
I don't know if like no, I do know this. In the 90s, generally we weren't saying we live like in a white supremacist society because like we were past like we did civil rights and everything, and that's awesome, you know. Today we live in a white supremacist, white national. Oh, not white. We'll say white supremacist. Everything is white supremacy. And like yeah, when you're fed like
there's no neutral in a moving train.
Types of narratives where like everything is so fucked, everything is so horrible. You've got like Colin Kaepernick is doing videos comparing NFL players to like fucking slaves and shit. It's like damn, like really is that really where we're at right now? Is this not like are we being a little bit too extreme here? Or yeah, it makes it hard to get. We need to give credit for the progress that has happened because people are just sometimes a little bit unrealistic. This ties into like 52 other things. Almost looping back to that trans thing. I don't like how people have taken like language from psychology or trauma and they've co-opted that to describe every fucking facet of the human experience. Where like let's say that you go to class and your teacher's a microaggression for you, you have trauma now. That's like a legitimate form of trauma. You've been traumatized and everything is traumatizing and white supremacy. Yeah, it's just. I don't know how to make those conversations publicly better. I do my thing, but I'm definitely in the minority. And like people like Hassan or like like these types of like larger figures that just kind of like play into that extremist culture, or whatever, you know, are definitely selling all the tickets and shit. So I don't know what the solution is to any of that ever, unfortunately.
Right. It seems like there's like an incentive to sort of spread this extremist message and to really dig in and wedge, you know, these problems and make them seem worse than they are.
Yeah.
And in some sense, you know, I think it forces you to really fundamentally question the purpose of like societal progress. Because if you create all of this societal progress and yet people are engaging in opioid use at higher rates and anxiety is increasing and people are, you know, less willing to like bring children into the world, you have all of these like metrics of like decline. You sort of have to ask like what is the actual meaning of like GDP figures going up? What is that actually telling you, if not that things are improving?
Yeah, and then you get into really weird, to loop back even more to our conversation where people are like, oh, this is what we need to do for feminism, this is what we need to do that, right? When you don't want to acknowledge the descriptive reality of what's happening, you start to create space for other figures that are willing to acknowledge those descriptive grounds. You cede that space to them and then you give them the power to talk about how to live their life. So for instance,
Like the Proud Boys.
Women are talked about a lot societally as being less happy today than they were traditionally. And it seems like every indication is that this is true. I've never heard an empirical attack against that. That does seem to be a true thing. But because people on the left are so unwilling to cede any ground at all, even if it means acknowledging like, okay, yeah, there are some cases where women are less happy, then you end up in this world where like, when you have a political party or a group of people that are telling you something isn't real or isn't happening, then people are like, well, hold on, this doesn't match with my reality, I'm not gonna agree with that. And then you end up giving so much more power to these other more radical figures, and that's kind of annoying as well. Yeah.
I think that's true to an extent. I do think the left...
Like in this instance, women aren't happy anymore, which is true. Democrats don't acknowledge that. So then like the Proud Boys for like Western chauvinists can be like, well, it's because they're out of the kitchen. You know, Squad Dovey.
willing to cede this ground. And I'll give you an example. The problem though is the left, their explanation for this is that we're just not left enough. Right?
Yes, always.
We're not in the
that's why Bernie lost. It's not because he was too far left. He just didn't go left enough. Or that's why, you know, this happens because, yeah. Or this idea that like everybody actually agrees with us. They just don't know it yet for whatever reason. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So even then,
You haven't demonstrated that they don't know it yet.
society that's like more and more progressive over hundreds of years, you see like some of these metrics don't indicate like great results. And I'm not necessarily blaming that on progressivism. Like, frankly, I'm like, I would just identify as like a moderate right liberal type person. But I think you do have to like sort of question like the narrative that if we just go like the next step leftward, things are going to get better.
Somebody, a conservative that I used to be a long time ago, he disappeared from my committee because fucking Irish lady made death threats against him. But a question was, what, X kills me?
Is it X Kills Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, how much of my shit do you watch? The fuck? Okay.
X Kills Me specifically. I watched his debate with Irish Laddie
Oh, okay.
a long time ago.
I disagree with him a lot because he's a smart guy. I enjoy the challenge of talking to him. Like it forces me to like really stake out my positions and understand why I believe the things that I do. So I appreciated that from him. But I was gonna say something that he asked me once was a really good question. I never even stopped.
She's base as fuck, by the way.
Was it had to do with like
I like her
women
makeup
being
too.
action.
Very cute.
And he was like, okay, you think that women don't have enough representation in these places, right?
Very
I'm
good
like,
compliment with her
you agree
glasses
there's
frames.
Some probable like there's probably going to be a natural difference between men and women in these positions, right? Even if all else equal, I'm like, yeah, there's probably some natural difference. And he's like, okay, well, how do you know when to stop? How do you know when you've gone far enough? I have no fucking idea. I don't have a metric by which I examine, right? Like, here's a question: like, how much affirmative action is necessary to like answer the question? Like, okay, black people are no longer systemically disadvantaged. Now it's just up to like individual black people to take advantage of the system that exists, that is like fixed now, right? Would we ever accept that answer if there still exists like some inequality between the two groups of people? Even if the fact of the matter was that well, most of the issues have been fixed, right? That's a really hard question to answer, I think, and really hard to grab with. And a lot of people don't think about it at all. At least I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you
Destiny actually has some arguments that like say that maybe we shouldn't do it on a race basis, which is a little weird. Champ already held up the bell curve. Like that's like the bell curve is a response to Lyndon B. Johnson passing the Great Society projects and different laws included in that, which helped poverty, and that's also when affirmative action like came into play as well. So the bell curve is basically a critique to those different programs, and that's like their entire point. So, and many times Destiny makes this argument and doesn't realize he's like genuinely agreeing with Charles Murray, but you know, that's okay.
you look at the current scholarly consensus or the leftward like push in the scholarly arena, it's to look at these gaps in
He also builds
or
Kraken
gaps
Slayer
in-
on Tristana, so what can I expect?
Explanation is racism. So if you have like a gap in wealth between black and white families, the assumption is going to be that that gap is because of racism, and that the only solution is going to be to disproportionately benefit black families. So like Ibram X. Kendi, I mentioned reading his book. This is this entire concept of anti-racism. It's the idea that it's not enough to be neutral and to create policies that equally benefit both black and white people. Rather, policies need to be anti-racist. They need to explicitly benefit black families more than white families.
So you just
Part of that
if you're interested in Ibram X. Kendi or Rob D'Angelo, just look up Howard Zinn instead. He's incredibly fucking based.
is right, and if you're not explicitly benefiting black families over white families, then you're being racist.
Still racist, yeah.
Right, and it's either racist or anti-racist in this way.
There is no neutral on a moving train.
And so, I think
Squad W.
unfortunately, this sort of blind, like not making use of the explanation for why a gap might exist, because like realistically, some of that
Fuck.
gap probably is because of racism, right? That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know what proportion of it is racism, what proportion of it is just like wealth lagging behind, right? I don't know exactly the answers to those things, but the progressive solution is it just going to be like throwing money and resources at the groups, and I think in a sense
Yes.
that like disincentivizes a group of people from changing, right, or adapting or doing things differently, right? And so
Potentially.
No.
there's a bad habit, right?
But it's okay.
He says that like something like 25% of like the wealth gap between black and white families could be eliminated by just changing like spending habits. I don't know if that's true. He cites a study, but I haven't seen the studies refuting it, so it could be wrong. But if that is true in the hypothetical world where it is, then if we're just throwing money to like shorten this gap to reduce it to nothing, then eventually you're going to reduce that gap to nothing. But the spending habits are going to remain, and you're just going to be like sinking money year into year to like support spending habits, which are good.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, this is a take that Vosh has, which I think is like morally reprehensible. He conflates that money travels, like if you look at Asian communities, if you look at white communities, especially with like Walmart and stuff like that, even if you look at like Jewish communities, money stays within the communities for a longer time, and it's cycled. So the circulation of money is for like up to a month in some cases, whereas like it only takes 18 hours, I believe. All right, I'm gonna literally, it's like the complex fucking thing. I'm bad with numbers, so we're gonna get the actual. I wonder if the first one's the same thing, but when people talk about disenfranchisement in economic system, inciting like how there's no businesses run by black people, so the money can't circulate within them. They often point to this figure. Okay. A dollar would circulate in the Asian community for over 30 days, in the Jewish community for 20 days, in the white community for 17 days, but in the black community only 6 hours, not 18. So, in his debate with Tim Pool, Vosh cited not necessarily cited this, but pretty much gave this explanation and said, well, if we pay reparations, in the exact argument, Tim Pool asked him, it was Tim Pool and Charlie Kirk, excuse me. They were asking Vosh about reparations, because, Vosh was there to rationalize their insane delusions. And Vosh said, yeah, no, reparations shouldn't be a thing, because if we give money to these black communities, it's only going to go to white people anyways. It's only going to go to Asian Americans anyways. Which the entire argument of the bell curve is that saying that the IQ and like it's centered on IQ and how black people and Latino people are Americans specifically, their IQs are less. So if you give them affirmative action, it'll just be wasted. So this argument is very, very akin to like the same kind of rhetoric that is kind of the backbone of the bell curve, as it's a response to Great Society and affirmative action. But we'll continue. Thank you for the diatribe.
Yeah, I agree. One of the really scary implications right now of like stuff that's going on is holy fuck, the difference in educational attainment between men and women is crazy. Have you seen how huge the gap has gotten? It's like 40.
That was kind of a diatribe, a little bit.
Yeah, holy fuck, that's not good. And that's like a question of like, okay, well fuck, okay. But the thing is, and I read this from their educators. I don't know if this is a Slate article or if someone emailed me about their university. I don't remember. Fuck. A lot of people in like different areas email me things, so I get like perspectives of different areas. But like the consensus I've heard, and this might not be true, so I'm warning you there. But like you couldn't even begin to talk about that problem in an academic setting. Like, hey.
Also, if you want to look up about reparations, look up the majority report Sandy-Darity. It's literally the day after the H3H3 Steven Crowder like thing happened. Literally the day after that, Sandy-Darity, who's an economist from Duke, went on the program with Emma Vigeland and Sam Cedar and went through his book. That podcast is like, some of Sam Cedar stuff is like a little iffy for at least Destiny's crowd, but I think this specific podcast was like one of the best ones. Take it as you will, but I think there's like grounds to reparations. So
hey, maybe women are doing okay in school now, and now we need to shift the focus back to men. You could never have that conversation in an administrative setting. It's impossible, and that's probably a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like the cycling of different opinions we talked about earlier.
Women is crazy right now.
Spending habits are going to remain,
Yeah.
and you're just going to be like sinking money year into year to like support spending habits, which are good.
Yeah.
supporting the spending
I agree.
habits.
One of the really scary implications right now of like stuff that's going on is
White women are by far the largest benefactor of or from affirmative action. So this is Destiny's like newest point that if we like say this, people will like
holy fuck.
cry
The difference
foul.
in educational attainment between men and women is crazy. Have you seen how huge the gap has gotten? It's like 40-60.
Especially in minority communities.
Yeah, holy fuck, that's not good. And
No.
that's like a question of like, okay, well fuck, okay. But the thing is, and I read this from their educators. I don't know if this is a Slate article or if it was somebody that emailed me about their university. I don't remember. Fuck. A lot of people in like different areas email me things, so I get like perspectives of different areas. But like the consensus I've heard, and this might not be true, so I'm warning you there. But like you couldn't even begin to talk about that problem in an academic setting. Like, hey, maybe women are doing okay in school now, and now we need to shift our focus back to men. You could never have that conversation in an administrative setting. It's impossible.
Squad W.
And that's probably a problem, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like the stifling of different opinions we talked about earlier, and the inability to like really question or get out of our echo chambers. And it was like such a meme, and I think people took it too far with like the marketplace of ideas. But like, sort of thinking about it now, I do think that there's like a kernel of truth to that, and like we do need to have ideas competing and
Yeah,
questioning each other.
or like I don't want to give conservatives credit here, the anti-SJW bros or whatever. I do. The problem is that like back then, the people that were representing the market place idea, they were dog shit losers that didn't do it well. Okay, I will never get to a place where I'm like, well, hopefully not, God forbid, where I'll ever say some shit like, you know what, Dave Rubin had a really good point here. No, Dave Rubin has always been a dog shit, dumb fuck, anti-intellectual moron. Okay, but like the lack of challenge for people on the left, I think did go a bit too far. And now the way the conservatives used to engage with those concepts of like the marketplace ideas, I think was really bad. But like there is a legitimate way that we can engage with those ideas in a positive manner, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. And a lot of the conservative champions for these ideas have definitely not been very good or very credible. And like Jordan Peterson, he's another one of these people who like, frankly, he's like really not good at talking about ideas. He has this thing that like my friend was saying to me. He'll tell people to like be a monster, right? And to like embrace some sort of like monstrous internal side of you. And every time he says this, he has to like walk back and explain what the fuck he means because people are confused by it.
Yeah.
And I think he's just like not good at communicating these ideas, or maybe he just likes like people being confused and having to be like, no, actually, you're misrepresenting me, and my beliefs are different, right?
Well,
He does this
actually,
constantly. One of the ways that I
8 and 1 Destiny.
He'll always make descriptive statements, but he'll never make
What is
prescriptive
up?
statements. So he will lead you, right? He'll say like, well, when women are in the workplace, of course,
Good God.
well, men compete over women in the workplace. Women in the workplace.
Kraken Slayer again?
And he'll be like, and then an interviewer that's not ready to deal with him, an interviewer will ask, are you saying that we shouldn't have women in the workplace? And then they'll be like, interviewer strawman's Jordan Peterson, claims that he says things that he never said. And I understand why people get so confused sometimes because Jordan Peterson will say things where it's like, are you trying to get at this? But he'll never actually go like that final step. And he might not even necessarily mean that to his credit because like as much as I don't like him, he doesn't seem like an idiot at least. But yeah, he definitely, everything he says about psychology is generally pretty true. But when he starts getting into like history, sociology, or politics, God forbid, or philosophy sometimes it's really bad. But when he talks about psychology, it's usually okay. But I understand why people get confused sometimes listening to him do his stuff. Yeah.
You know, did you see like the Dgg debate with
Oh
Peterson?
God, I saw part of it, yeah, where he tried to learn communism like by reading the manifesto, and that was it or
Yes.
whatever. Yeah.
Like when we talked about the Communist Manifesto, which, yeah, no, it was just a complete disaster.
Yeah.
And you can really see that like every time he sort of talks about communism, he like really does not understand the ideas, and it gives leftists like so much ammunition to be like, you're just completely wrong, or like you're misusing these terms, and like they're correct, right? Because he is misusing the terms, and he is like not understanding the theories. So, but like at the same time, Peterson, he described it as like cultural Marxism, and like
Postmodern.
fucking awful
cultural-
branding.
yeah.
I don't know why he uses these words, but like, I think he's like essentially getting to like a good idea, which is like the evolution of Marxism into like the cultural sphere in America. But of course, he has to use cultural Marxism, which is like an antiquated like Nazi conspiracy theory.
Yeah, or postmodern. cultural Marxism, or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever negative
Postmodern
term.
like neo-Marxism.
She's so based. This interview is fucking fire as
I just look at
shit.
these figures, it feels like a really weird clout content farming game where everybody is Steven Crowder. Nobody truly wants to step to somebody that can challenge their ideas in a rigorous manner, even in a friendly manner. But instead, we all just spend time, not we, I don't do this, I'll any motherfucker, okay? But everybody will spend all their time trying to farm college kids or like random dipshits instead of like, I want to see Steven Crowder, like debating Sam Cedar, okay? Or I want to see like these big people on the left having debates with like Jordan Peterson and shit. I want to see that. I want to see Anna Kasparian talking to Jordan Peterson. I want to see these kinds of conversations. But it seems really hard to get these like titans to match up against each other because everybody's just kind of like safely, like farming, easy clappers or whatever in the background. You ever play a game called Eve?
I've never played Eve.
Okay. But yeah, anyway, yeah.
About it, though.
What? Well, I was gonna say there's
I
like
know it's like a space game.
there's a phenomenon in that game where everybody acts like they're super hardcore, but they're not. People only take like easy fights. If you see somebody that you can beat up on, then you go and you kill them, and nobody takes a challenging fight in that game ever. And it's so fucking boring. People always talk about how it's like cool games. No, it's just a bunch of fucking losers farming killing else. But yeah, sorry, it was random. But yeah.
I had to delete my Twitter link from my Twitch because apparently, if you have NSFW pictures on Twitter, you get in trouble.
Yeah, you
so
could. Yeah.
I just deleted that.
Okay. Well. Then,
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think it speaks to like there's like a market demand for being able to easily beat down on people, right, and to score easy points against people, and so that does not incentivize people having challenging, difficult conversations. If a challenging, difficult conversation can get you clipped and destroyed,
Yeah.
right, and so it's not a good environment for truth
Yeah.
to flourish at all, and so I think that sometimes like leftists have like good analysis, and I think this is like one of the examples of like the profit incentive is not towards like truth, good conversations, and building a better future. It's towards destroying people, towards making yourself look good, and towards like
being a celebrity.
misrepresenting people.
Yeah, that's all you want is to increase your own personal clout. And you'll even get people, not to rag on him,
Social capital, baby.
I don't mean to like single him out. But like where like Vosh has constructed this like elaborate set of rules that basically makes it so that like he can only talk to people that are more popular than him, but never anybody that's less popular than him.
Yeah, and as long as he's like properly, he knows his stuff about slavery, so he can back up his facts in a debate about critical race theory with Charlie Kirk. He's the only one competent enough to actually have that conversation.
And like he's like utilitarian
Spoiler: he's not. By the way, he's not.
justification as well. If I ever platform somebody that's less popular than me, then they have the capacity to gain an audience off of me, which I never want that to happen. So I can only talk to people that represent an ability for me to grow myself so that I can spread my ideology in a positive way or whatever. And but he basically, despite the fact that he grew debating larger figures, because only you can grow, now he's like, I can never debate somebody that would challenge me lower than me. I can only go for like higher. So like all these people in their minds have this idea where it's like maximum cloud farming, but there's really good moral reasons for it. It's like, okay,
Yeah, to me that sounds like sort of like a post hoc like justification,
a little bit maybe. Yeah.
where you start with something that you want to do and you sort of just justify it afterwards.
Yeah, might be the case. That's a very salient point you raised. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm glad you think so. One thing about religion that I like is that it sometimes forces you to like engage with things, not because you want to from the beginning, but because you are adopting like a broader framework. So if you like go out shopping for a religion that already justifies everything you already believe in and discredits everything you don't believe in,
Snap it
all
off.
you're doing is you're just like justifying your own beliefs.
It's a snap keep.
But you can find a lot of meaning in actually like wholly adopting a belief system, even when it requires you to make certain sacrifices in life. And that actually can make it feel like a lot more meaningful, and you can derive,
I really dig the League ASMR in the background. It's really good for me.
a lot more from engaging in a belief system that requires some sacrifice, and one that just lets you do whatever you want, right?
Sure. Or at the very least, it's worth it to understand the belief system, to know why somebody would do this. Like, at the very least, that level of engagement can be important.
Yeah, for sure. That was thank you, Destiny.
Yeah,
Good
no
stuff.
problem. Well, are you like seen as like a Nazi online then, or what?
A Nazi? I hope not.
Oh, okay.
I'm Jewish.
Doesn't matter. People
not
still call
great.
you.
Fuck.
Yeah, no. I don't talk about politics too much. I'm just like moderately on the right, like center right. So,
Interesting. Okay.
which I've gotten people like on TikTok and stuff be like, "Wow, like a trans person who's not a communist, like insane."
Because the whole LGBTQ community got fucking co-opted by the cringy commie socialist shit on Twitter. It's like even sex workers. It's like you're in like two huge crowds. Like all of them are communists and socialists. Like every fucking it's so cringe.
It's really rough. And I've definitely have like friendships where we just like don't talk about politics because we disagree so much, and we know that if we start talking about politics, it's gonna be like a meltdown.
Yeah. Well, anything else?
I think that's it. I'm glad you were able to talk to me about it. It was pretty fun. Hopefully, we were able to. I think we were able to get pretty deep. We didn't like spend too much time on the trans stuff, but I think we brought it to like a pretty meaningful.
Sure.
place.
Or is there anything else that you want to loop back? Do you believe in like? Well, here, let's start with this. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that these okay, I'm gonna jerk myself off. I don't mean to. But the conversations sound really boring with people that have thought about this work because I think we end up agreeing on almost everything. But but nobody seems. So here's a question: do you think there is an underlying? I'll say the most one up. Do you think there's an underlying fact of the matter about your gender? Is there like a truth value to like in your brain? Do you have a gender identity that is more male or more female?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, and I don't think it matters. So like, one thing that I think makes me sort of unique in the trans space is that it doesn't actually matter to me that much whether or not someone calls me like a woman or a man, right? People will make whatever estimation they make about me. At the end of the day, that's just how it works. But fundamentally, what I care about is like being able to just like live my life how I want to and like present the way that I want to. And as long as someone's like allowing me to like transition and to present female and to like wear dresses and makeup, these are like things that I've always liked doing. They can like internally think that I'm male or whatever. As long as they're not like outing me in like dangerous positions, then I think I'm okay with it.
So do you believe in like
Very
other
based.
gender,
Good job.
things like I think they're broadly referred to as xenogenders. Do you know what that means?
They're like the Tumblr like star gender, autism gender.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you think that like any sort of identity, or literally, I don't say this as an insult, but like attack helicopter gender. So like Demon Mama will defend this concept of like if that's how you express your gender, it's a valid form of gender expression. Do you think that like all of these things are legitimate genders, or do you draw a line anywhere, or?
So legitimate genders. I mean, I think that like gender is probably a social construction, right? So like I could imagine a society where there is like an autism gender. I don't really know what that means because I don't have a conception of that in my society, but I think we could imagine that as like a cultural thing. Yeah. But in the society now, I don't think that really is a gender, I guess. And there's obviously, I think, no like underlying biological fact of the matter that like compels people to identify as autism gender.
So one cool thing about like that debate that I don't think this is ever admitted, especially by like Dino, but we can call a spade as a spade. There's a shit ton of trans people who are autistic. Like that's just what it is, right? So there even could be in like Steven's argument this like claim for like utility in autism gender, but we never get that conversation because no one wants to bite the bullet and calling trans women autistic.
So like I do think that there's like an underlying biological fact of the matter.
Not just trans women, obviously, but optically, like that's just not what you want to do.
Right. That does seem like quite intuitive to me because like I watched your Mr. Girl discussion, and I think if someone could talk me out of being trans, I would take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, snap it off. Snap it off.
And the fact that,
Fuck. That's just not what it is, sweetie.
That I could someday do that indicates to me that there is probably some sort of very deep-rooted part of my brain that is, not going to be changed easily.
Okay, that I think so. It sounded like you disagree, but it sounds like we majorly agree. Maybe we just identify this, or we use different words to describe this. But I would say that it feels to me, when I say there's like a fact of the matter, what I mean is that like, if I wanted to, I couldn't just decide a different gender tomorrow or change that. Or like, just like, well, I'm going to pretend to be this and I'm going to feel right. Like, there seems to be some deep internal part of me that maps onto something in my brain that's like, I feel masculine, or I feel non-binary, I feel it seems to be a thing that exists. The only reason why I ask is because all the xenogender stuff will kind of like fall from there. So if I believe that, I don't think that you can identify as like autism gender. It's not like a gender. I don't know if we have like the internal mapping or construct to have a gender that is autistic. I don't know if that makes sense. It seems like we all kind of fall in this masculine, feminine dichotomy. That seems to be the case, or binary or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think that when we talk about gender, you have to understand there's like a political project, and that political project is aimed towards gender abolition, right?
Yeah,
and so
I don't know what that means. I feel like it goes back and forth, but go, yeah, what do you mean by that?
When people on the internet are talking about xenogenders and they're validating them, I think the reason why they want to validate them is because on an ideological level, they think that it will help to deconstruct and remove gender, right? Gender abolition, it'll help to abolish it. And so I think that's really the goal of xenogenders, is to like poke fun at the concept of gender and to discredit the idea and to reduce it to just sort of a basic identity.
Her analysis is spot on.
What I think does exist, and that is some internal biological impulse to align yourself with one of the two sexes.
Gotcha.
And if I had to guess, I'd say that there's probably a real internal biological mechanism that encourages you to, align yourself one way or the other, or be with one way or the other.
Sorry.
And then I think when you see like the cultural practices that are associated with that sex, right, the part of your brain that like believes you want to be that sex, is going to tell you that you should engage in those sorts of practices in order to like validate that feeling that you are that sex, even if you aren't really. So I think that's like kind of the explanation of the biological mechanism and the cultural interplay.
Probably, yeah. Okay, I don't think I would necessarily disagree actually. What else? Was there anything more specific about trans that you want to talk about? You go.
Trans DIY.
Yeah,
I think
can
that
hit on, yeah.
your takes on trans DIY are sort of incongruent with your takes on drugs more generally. It seems to me that you believe people are justified or okay with taking drugs, even like illicit and potentially quite dangerous drugs.
Oh, is she about to bring up the methstiny?
They accept the responsibility
Oh,
of
baby.
the effects and do their due diligence to like research them. And I think that like hormones, especially not so much testosterone, but especially estrogen, is something that the effects of it they're seen on the time scale of months or years, and they're not something you are ever going to overdose on. They're just going to be converted into harmless molecules in the body. So it seems to me that like on the scale of doing drugs, like gray market hormones is like very much on the justified end versus doing more illicit substances. I think you can justify both, but it seems to me like you justify the more extreme version of drug use, but then somehow draw the line at like a much more okay form of drug use or a much less dangerous form of drug use.
Yeah, I think I talked about this earlier, where I said that like I don't necessarily have problems with the do-it-yourself hormones. It was the culture of people online surrounding it that made me really uncomfortable. And I gave that example of that one. There's some crazy lady that was like bragging about like I've talked to like 7 minors this month. I've gotten them doing stuff. That felt like really weird to me. If I were to draw a 1-to-1 comparison to drugs, I think I would actually still feel pretty much the same. I think there'd be a big difference between somebody online saying like I really wanted to try heroin. You know what? I did it. I did it, blah, 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 versus somebody that's like I got 7 of my friends into heroin and I'm so proud of myself for doing it. Like I think that the feeling there is really different. And then I would also say that like doing a drug I think is a bit different than using a drug to change into a new identity or to match like a gender expression. I think that these are fundamentally different things. But that even all that being said, even though those two aspects are different, I don't think I'm opposed to do-it-yourself hormones like done in a reasonable, sensible manner. I think, like I said at the beginning, in some countries you're on like a 2-year wait list for shit, and that might be like too late for a lot of people. And if you do the research and do-it-yourself hormones seem fine, then I think I'm okay with that. I just get really weird about the culture around it. You mentioned like the anime profile pics and the My Little Pony people that are like bragging about like roping minors and do-it-yourself hormones and shit, and that seems really.
I just wish
There's some crazy.
I just wish everyone had access to the information to the point where it could be a safe thing, where you didn't need these random like trans weirdos. Trans weirdos. That's not what I meant to say. I'm sorry. You don't have these random Twitter weirdos, because obviously not all trans people are weirdos. Only a few of us, me included, 100%. But these weirdos on Twitter, like making like a game out of it, is what Steven's saying. And again, that's also anecdotal as well. But there is a culture for that. But regardless of that culture, we should strip away consultations and stuff like that, and different, ways to gatekeep that. And then it also lessens the argument that, doctors are gatekeeping trans identities from, closeted trans folk. It weakens the argument for trans medicalism, or not trans medical, but self diagnosis.
Where people are like bragging about getting with minors to like cut themselves and take hormones. Yeah, insane shit for sure. So I agree that culture is bad, but I'm glad you clarified that like do-it-yourself or like gray market drugs are not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
It's
Boom.
more sort of like the culture around it that you want to seriously challenge.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've said as
Nice.
much. I don't know if it's come across in my debates, but every time I bring it up on stream, I always say that like this is the only case. You know, there are reasons why people do it. I can understand. I can empathize. Sometimes it's like literally your only option unless you're gonna wait for years or whatever. But man, that culture online is real fucking weird.
And ban a champion.
Yeah, I have some trans friends, and they believe that this is like one of your sort of like worst takes around trans issues. So I definitely wanted to challenge you on it because I agreed. I think that like it did seem like a little bit inconsistent to me. So I feel satisfied with your clarification.
Sure. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you prefer to be called
Steven,
or Destiny?
Steven.
Steven. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking, Steven.
No problem. What do you go by online?
April's good or
April.
Tap.
Okay, because you have like 20 different names. I think you mentioned your
I'm
name.
so sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, stay safe.
Everything like official is all Tap.
Are you trying to get more into like the screaming at people online for politics stuff, or was this just a conversation you were interested in? Or I don't know if you do like Twitch panels or anything like that.
I don't. I'd love to get more into it because I think like you have to really build like a personality, not cold, but like you need to build those relationships on the internet with people.
Gotcha.
And Twitch politics seems crazy as far as harassment. Last year, I wasn't even in like politics, but like I was getting people like harassing me on the internet, and I had to like take a break. But I think that in coming back and having experienced like that level of like harassment, I feel like a lot more comfortable with just being like whatever and sort of jumping into like the politics sphere, even though it's extraordinarily vitriolic.
It is. Yeah.
I think part of me in like a weird way enjoys like a little bit of vitriol, which probably sounds insane, but like there's like something satisfying about sort of getting to butt heads with people a little bit.
I feel the same way. I understand 100%. So yeah. Okay. Well, cool. I've said this before. People call me transphobic. I don't care. The trans community online is absolutely fucking insane. So having like more reasonable trans people is really good. It's embarrassing to say this, but like I have to remind my audience every time when I intersect with these communities that like in real life there are tons of really cool trans people. There's a lot of really reasonable ones, but for some reason it's only the most extreme, insane, socialist, communist, like most radical people that you ever find online in these communities, which is really disappointing. So yeah, if you want to get involved, I think that'd be really cool. But
for sure, I think that you've been like a good introduction because you seem pretty reasonable and like willing to listen to me out, even though that like you say that I'm reasonable. There are things that I'm like also crazy on. So
sure, it's not so much like the when I say reasonable, I don't necessarily mean like we agree on everything even necessarily. I just mean more like has a thought process, is willing to engage with ideas, isn't just going to instantaneously call me like a fascist, Nazi, Hitler, authoritarian. Like is like can have a conversation, right? Yeah, these types of people are like sorely needed in this world. So both in Twitch politics and in like the actual real world. So yeah.
Real world and trans community.
all right, thanks for talking, Stephen. Maybe we'll do it again another time.
This is like one of the best Destiny debates or not debates, but conversations I have seen, period. And I've been watching for a while.
Lucky person. What a loser, guys.
What an absolute loser.
Interesting. That person's really cool. I don't know what their name was still. April. That's for sure.
Fuck. We already got a kill.
Yeah, I had no idea what that conversation.
I guess I've been on a panel with Mr. Girl. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and we got to talk.
We're just
about
farming it up.
like,
We're just farming it up.
concept of debate.
That's just what's up.
And, like,
We're just
how
farming it
we-
up.
I guess why we do debate and how we do debate.